Dr. Sharma, we've been talking about polymorphism in Hinduism, and it sounds to me like what you're saying is that Hinduism embraces pluralism. And is that, I mean, it sounds wonderful. Is that true? Could I characterize it that way?
Well, when you put it that way, it challenges my modesty, but I am compelled by the facts to agree that yes, Hinduism is characterized by pluralism, and many people have found this, have identified this as a very attractive feature of that tradition. But when we were talking earlier, you also added that it is so democratic. And that helps us identify a problem with this position too. In a democracy, all kinds of political practices are allowed, which horrify more dictatorial regimes. I mean, China has made a point of advertising the recent American election and the confusion in the wake of his election with the not so subtle message that our system is far more orderly, at least more orderly by comparison. And it redounds to, the comparison redounds to the credit of our system. What happens in the case of pluralism is that because it allows all kinds of doctrines and practices, it is reluctant to pass judgment on any set of doctrines and practices. And thereby, it allows certain doctrines and practices to thrive, or at least to survive, which many would consider undesirable, or which even a consensus might consider undesirable. You have put your finger on a very fine place in the study of Hinduism, because Hinduism is regularly accused of permitting sati, child marriage, preventing widow remarriage, and so on. And this is so because when it feels that a certain group of people genuinely accept those doctrines and practices as a part of their authentic religious life, then it has a tendency to back off from criticizing it. And because it is founded on the principle, to put it a bit lightly, you are okay, I am okay, because that is the only spirit in which you can accommodate the diversity. And diverse groups can accept diversity only by accepting each other's beliefs and practices. That is why Hinduism has always remained strange, because it wants to remain plural.
Well, I would say I would still prefer a democracy to a dictatorship, and that tension with, in the pluralistic sort of society is a tension that I think we in the West could learn from.
Yeah, it is a positive tension, we might say. Well, I mean, that is why Hindus want to remain Hindus. and don't want to convert to other religions because they value this pluralism, and to a certain extent they are willing to accept this cost of pluralism. But one can see that one does have a problem here. You might say that it is the right kind of problem. It is better to have the problem that you are allowing these kinds of doctrines and practices to flourish than to have the problem that you ban these doctrines and practices, and then that process killed so many people and so many cultures. Yes. But you can also see how anyone with a robust sense for the normative will be a bit put off by this aspect of Hinduism. And we have to respect that, because that criticism also comes from a high place. Moral norms enable us to function effectively as a group. And so, of course, we should not become authoritarian in trying to observe them or make people observe them. But when we become too lax in observing them, then we can also have problems of another kind, of the degrading of the religious life.
So I have a question then about this. With this kind of ethic of pluralism that Hinduism holds, is there any kind of proselytizing? Is there, how do they go about converting other people? Does that happen?
Hindus don't. However, Hindus don't convert. Their position in this matter is that God, in His benevolence, accepting the plurality of the human situation, has provided for different religions as a means by which different communities could celebrate the divine. And if it is not, and therefore, it is not necessary to change. And if it is not necessary to change, then it is necessary not to change. Therefore, they will not ask anybody else to change the religion. However, if somebody else felt that the person's own religious life would be improved by becoming a member of the Hindu community, then they accept, or at least they have been on two minds about this. But the current trend within Hinduism is increasingly to accept those persons within the fold. But with one very important difference. When this happens, in the natural order of things, then they do not ask of the other person to abandon his or her own tradition. For a Hindu, a hyphenated existence is a perfectly normal way of living. Hindu Buddhist, Hindu Sikh, Hindu Jain, Hindu Christian, Hindu Muslim, Hindu Jew, Hindu. It is not for others, perhaps, but for the Hindu, this poses no problems. But it is a problem because it poses problems for others.
So my question coming off of that would be, you mentioned in your answer that Hindus maybe are of two minds about converting other people. What is the second mind?
The second mind is illustrated by the following incident. A Christian approached a Hindu Swami with the request that he convert to Hinduism, that the Swami convert the Christian to Hinduism. And the Swami asked him, have you tried Christianity? The point being that the aim of religious life is to change one's life, not one's religion. Now, if you feel that in order to change your life, you have to change your religion, then we probably have an authentic case for conversion, provided it does not involve the rejection of one's previous religious affiliation.